You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Lanterns authorization code accepted. Logging in. Your access to the HollowNet has been approved. Please stand by.
You're listening to the HollowNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. The new conservative resistance begins right here, right now.
I will build a great wall on our southern border, and I will have Mexico pay for that wall. Mark my words.
The American people are frustrated because their elected officials don't listen. When we're home on the campaign trail, we say we listen. And yet something about this Senate floor, something about Washington, D.C., I don't know if it's the water, something in the air, the cherry blossoms, but people get here and they stop listening to the American people.
What we witnessed here today in the Security Council is an insult. It won't be forgotten. It's one more example of the United Nations doing more harm than good in addressing the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
My duty, and the sacred duty of every elected official in this chamber, is to defend Americans, to protect their safety, their families, their communities, and their right to the American dream. Because Americans are dreamers too.
I want the people of America to be able to work less for the government and more for themselves. I want them to have the rewards of their own industry. This is the chief meaning of freedom. Until we can reestablish a condition under which the earnings of the people can be kept by the people, we are bound to suffer a very severe and distinct curtailment of our liberty.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Arizona.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Senators, members of Congress, Mr. Speaker, and Mr. President. You had one damn job. Seriously.
You're listening to the HollowNet on Lanterns Media Network. The Millennial Conservative Resistance begins here.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, the Lanterns Media Network proudly brings to you from beautiful downtown Phoenix, Arizona, the HollowNet Podcast. I am your host, Matt Holloway, and that was probably the worst D-Generation X impersonation you ever heard. Continuing to work on it every single day, but we are here in downtown Phoenix, not quite downtown, a little bit to the west side, but I like to say it because it sounds cooler, and it is the day of the big game, when everyone, and I mean is going to be glued to the TV set watching the NFL, seeing who's going to take the knee and who's not going to take the knee, and they're not going to be paying any attention to me. So, you're probably listening to this on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, some point other than Sunday when I'm actually live streaming it on Facebook.com/HollowNet. You can tweet us at the HollowNet. We're here on the Lanterns Media Network holding it down when nobody else wants to, because I am that I am not particularly interested in who wins the Pats or the Eagles, because I'm from New Jersey, so boo to both of them. Yeah. So, couple of sodas, couple of cups of coffee, using my vintage, extremely limited edition, how limited? There's only one of them, limited edition HollowNet coffee mug that you may notice an increased speed and alacrity of my speech today. I'm also a bit charged up. Why am I charged up? Because we have had an entire week of Memogate. That's right, we have had an entire week to digest and divest the incredible memo that came out from Mr. Nunez and the contents therein, which seem to be very, very, how do I put this in a nice, polite fashion, critical of Carter Page and of the DNC and Fusion GPS and of the entire system of the FISA court. The notable complaint here being that the justice who governed the case in the FISA court, who judged in this case the validity of the request for a warrant, was never made aware of the extremely political and biased origins of the Steele dossier, the Steele dossier. I almost called it Steele portfolio, but that starts to make it sound like maybe he's a high-end photographer with a great amount of skill and artistic vision. But no, instead, the Steele dossier was, according to this memo, generated by a FBI asset who also is connected to the British Secret Service, the MI6 Secret Service, I believe, who has a significant axe to grind against President Trump and was willing to take desperate measures in order to prevent the president from being elected. Now, on the surface, Stefan Molyneux, Sticks and Hammer, Razor Fist, a lot of people are calling this out as an absolute evidentiary explosion of treason deep in the heart of the FBI and the DOJ. Treason most foul indeed. But we have to pause just for a beat and read carefully into the memo that came out and realize that all references in it are to the application for the FISA court warrant. We must have the full 90-page FISA court warrant declassified in order for this memo to mean anything. Is the memo a nothing burger? Absolutely not. The memo is not a nothing burger. It is not negligible, as many in the mainstream media have tried to profess. It is far from it. And here at the HollowNet, the second that memo came out, what did I do? I provided the link to the scribed account that the Fox News editors were kind enough to provide us in their story, and I said, don't listen to the pundits, don't listen to the analysts, don't listen to the correspondents, bloody well read it. Read it yourself, draw your own conclusions. The only editorializing that I provided is that something is desperately wrong at the FBI and the DOJ, and no matter what reading you take of the contents of that memo and of the FISA court warrant, you must come to the inevitable conclusion that indeed something is very wrong. Either we're in such a state where the people have lost such faith in the legal system and the law enforcement system and the Department of Justice that this is actually viable in the public eye. People believe it, that the FBI and the DOJ are aligned against President Trump and have committed what is, in essence, political espionage and sabotage, which are crimes, or it actually happened. Both are bad. Both the situation where there's plausibility and also, if dear God help us, it actually shook out that way. And President Trump is 100% vindicated. That his read of the events leading up to and subsequent to his election were 100% accurate. That a knowing and willing coalition of co-conspirators within the DNC, the mainstream media, the FBI, the Department of Justice, and the higher echelons of the Obama administration did knowingly and willingly collude to produce false evidence against the presidential opponent. That is where Watergate is a drop in the bucket. But I stand back. I digress, and I tell you now that without the FISA court warrant application, all of it is speculation. That is the weakness of this memo. In connected news, we heard this week that one of the pillars of the House of Representatives, Representative Trey Gowdy of North Carolina, has announced he will not seek re-election. And I'm going to take some slings and arrows for this, because I got on Twitter and in earnest, heartfelt, impassioned plea asked him not to go. Because of all times in our history, now is the time when Congress needs a lawman, a prosecutor, someone who upholds justice greater than any other force. It's, to wax my nerd muscles a little bit, to flex them a little bit. If you ever watch Star Trek Deep Space Nine, we need Odo. Someone who is beholden only to Lady Justice. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the best descriptor I can possibly give for Representative Trey Gowdy. Now, that I've gone on my nice, 10 minute good diatribe about the memo, about Memogate. I must tell you that we have to address the State of the Union and a couple of key points that I have recently entered into the rotation of quotable quotes that you hear as you log into the HollowNet on Lanterns Media Network. We have to talk about the 4 pillars of President Trump's immigration plan, and we also have to discuss that Americans are dreamers too. Join the conversation. We're online. We're on Facebook.com/HollowNet. We are live. You can also tweet at the HollowNet. Hop on Twitter. You can also get me at lanterns.buzz, HollowNet.com, on iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Podcast Addict, anywhere you get your podcasts. Check us out. We are on the HollowNet right now for Lanterns Media Network as kickoff time looms. And as I said, I really don't expect anybody to listen to this till probably Monday or Tuesday. But hey, if you are live, we're here for you. Stick around.
Patriotic people of this country, a responsibility and a duty greater than that of any since the Civil War.
It is the common people of the world that are interested in this business. They know when we have war, it is they that have to bear the burden. It's their sisters and mothers and daughters that have to wait, trembling, to hear the news.
We are called as a people to give testimony in the sight of the world to our faith that the future shall belong to the free. Since this century's beginning, a time of tempest has seemed to come upon the continents of the earth.
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice. And let me remind you also that moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue.
I want the people of America to be able to work less for the government and more for themselves. I want them to have the rewards of their own industry. This is the chief meaning of freedom. Until we can reestablish a condition under which the earnings of the people can be kept by the people, we are bound to suffer a very severe and distinct curtailment of our liberty.
You're listening to the HollowNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. The new conservative resistance begins right here, right now.
You're listening to the HollowNet on Lanterns Media Network. The Millennial Conservative Resistance begins here.
Yes, indeed, that's right. The new conservative resistance does indeed begin right here, right now, with you. You're listening to the HollowNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network, and in the epic words of Fall Out Boy... Well, I actually do care what you think, even if it isn't about me. And I care what you think about the State of the Union address, which came out last week, and I watched with bated breath. I watched with great anticipation. Sorry I don't have the Rocky Horror Picture Show clip for anticipation. Gotta remember to pull that one down next week. I watched with eager anticipation as to what President Trump would roll out. And I came out with a couple of Facebook posts that not a lot of people agreed with. And, you know, that happens. That's kind of par for the course and occupational hazard for what I do. I did agree with several of the president's overtures to the left, trying to bring people together. I really enjoyed the pro-American spirit of it, the fact that it spoke to the people and it spoke to our principles. What I didn't like is where it was 150% big government gold mine coming out of that State of the Union speech. The president basically saying that he is willing to deal when it comes to the dreamers, in other words, people who are in this country illegally and are in fact committing a criminal act in every moment they remain within our country. Knowingly and willfully, I might add. And basically putting that up for political trade in order to get the wall. Now, I understand this. Political deals happen. You know, you have to come to the table with something the other side wants in order to be victorious and to meet the government's needs and compromise. I get it. I'm not happy about it, but I get it, okay? And I support the president's notion that these people should be absent from the political process for a period of years. I believe 12 years was his call out. We're going to go to the audio in just a second. But the things that I didn't hear that I wanted to, I didn't hear about a balanced budget. I didn't hear about entitlement reform, a flat tax, term limits, the 10th Amendment, our deficit reduction, Russia releasing the memo. I didn't hear about until afterward when it was revealed that the president spoke to a congressman and said he was 100% behind it. I would like to hear about it in the speech. I didn't hear anything about the Second Amendment and upholding that. There hasn't been any talk of auditing the Fed since Rand Paul ran for president, and the persecution of Christians around the globe I have not heard hide nor hair of from mainstream media or from Washington, D.C. So I would have liked to hear about these things. And I presented my opinion that if we did a little bit less of the self-aggrandizing, pat yourself on the back, here's this awesome person I invited and why they are awesome portion of the State of the Union, maybe there would have been more time. So I prefer a little more steak, a little less sizzle. I like mine rare, medium rare anyway. And I think there could have been a lot more meat on the bone for this State of the Union. All in all, though, I give the devil his due. It was a good speech. It was a fine speech. It was a great American presidential State of the Union speech, a view held by many in our country, as it has one of the highest approval ratings of a State of the Union, 75% of the country feeling the president did a good job. So, let's get to the sound bites. Now, the first thing I want to go to is probably the biggest bombshell to drop during the State of the Union is the president's quote that Americans are dreamers too, cut 3.
My duty and the sacred duty of every elected official in this chamber is to defend Americans, to protect their safety, their families, their communities, and their right to the American dream, because Americans are dreamers too.
Americans are dreamers too. Now, that's probably the point where a lot of the DNC shuffled around in their seats quite uncomfortably, and a whole lot of the Republicans in the room stood up and cheered, because Americans are indeed dreamers too. The dream that is referred to with the DREAM Act and the Dreamers is the American dream, and the American dream belongs to all of the American people. And you know what? You can have an American dream and be a foreign national, but you have to pursue it with vigor and with respect for the law. For a clear and present example of someone who does this, I'll refer you to Freedom's Disciple, an excellent podcast on the Blaze that's hosted by Jonathan Dunn, and a greater patriot who is not an American citizen you will never find. And it is an ongoing crime against the very nature of what it is to be American that he is not an American citizen. So we support, Bring John Home. We call it Bring Jonathan Home because Jonathan is more American than many people who live here. And I know that people like this exist in Mexico. I know that people like this exist in many nations around the world who want beyond want to become American citizens. But the difference between the people who come over our border illegally and the people like John is that they have such respect for the laws, order, and tradition of our nation that he would never dream of ever coming to this nation illegally. And he takes many trips a year here for speaking engagements, to meet with conservative groups and patriot groups, but would never overstay because he loves this country too much to dishonor it in such a fashion. That is the difference, folks, between people like Jonathan Dunn and the so-called dreamers. Now, the next thing we're going to touch on before we go into our break at the bottom of the hour are the 4 pillars that President Trump presented. This is about a 3-minute clip, but I think it's important to break down. So, the 4 pillars of the Trump administration's immigration agenda.
Here are the 4 pillars of our plan. The first pillar of our framework generously offers a path to citizenship for 1.8 million illegal immigrants who were brought here by their parents at a young age. That covers almost 3 times more people than the previous administration covered. Under our plan, those who meet education and work requirements and show good moral character will be able to become full citizens of the United States over a 12-year period. The second pillar fully secures the border. That means building a great wall on the southern border, and it means hiring more heroes like CJ to keep our communities safe. Crucially, our plan closes the terrible loopholes exploited by criminals and terrorists to enter our country, and it finally ends the horrible and dangerous practice of catch and release. The third pillar ends the visa lottery, a program that randomly hands out green cards without any regard for skill, merit, or the safety of American people. It's time to begin moving toward a merit-based immigration system. One that admits people who are skilled, who want to work, who will contribute to our society, and who will love and respect our country. The fourth and final pillar protects the nuclear family by ending chain migration.
So let's take that apart for a beat. Path to citizenship for the 1.8 million illegal immigrants, or dreamers, who were brought here by their parents at a young age. Fully securing the border, in other words, building the wall, and ending catch and release. Which, if you have ever lived in a southwestern state like, I don't know, Arizona, catch and release is an absolute nightmare. It is ridiculous in its absurdity that you take people who have just been smuggled across the border, whether they've been brought over by a coyote, whether they came over themselves, as long as they are not in possession of something like, 50 pounds of heroin. If it's just them, they come over, they're captured by Border Patrol, and they are released with a court date. Okay? Think just about how many people jump bail in this country every day. Think how backed up our legal system is. How does it make any viable sense that these people are caught by Border Patrol, given a court date for a hearing, for an immigration hearing, and then released onto American soil? Most of these people are caught within 100 or 150 or so miles of the border at the time. Why are they not brought to the nearest Border Patrol station, put on a bus, and dropped there happy off right in Sonoita or in Heroica Nogales, where they bloody well came over? Seriously. Why are they driven another hour up to Phoenix or 40 minutes east to Tucson and dropped off in the streets of one of the top 10 largest cities in the United States with a court date summons in hand and a pat on the back for good luck, instead of dropped the off right next to the entry they came in from? Even if they came over in Native American land, because we have the Tonoho O'odham Reservation, which is huge, by the way. It's a gigantic reservation, piece of Native American land, and a lot of illegal immigrants come over via there. Why don't you just drive them back over the flippin' border? You have border crossings at Ajo. You have border crossings at Tucson. You have border crossings at Sonoita. You have border crossing at, what's that one? Oh, right over by Yuma. You actually have one right over by Yuma. You have all these border crossings just in Arizona, where you just pop over the border, drop them off at the nearest large city. Think about it. Why does it make any sense for us to drop these people off on the street in a foreign nation versus dropping them off on the street in their home country? Which is safer? Where you probably have somewhere to go home to, or some family that you can visit upon, or at least be supported by your government. And people consider this hateful that the president is looking to close catch and release. running long on the break, but I'm going to finish my thoughts here. The third pillar ends the visa lottery, a program that randomly hands out green cards without any regard for skill, merit, or the safety of our people, according to President Trump. A lot of people have pointed out that the green card lottery takes into account things like skill and merit and background check, etc., so on and so forth. Since when in the hell, the actual fires of burning sulfuric hell, has randomness ever played into a reward structure in the United States, except for, like, the literal lottery, like the Mega Millions or the Powerball? With something as important as whether or not you can enter our country, the system needs to be 100% merit and need-based. If you are being persecuted in your home country and are under threat of death, that falls under refugee status. That's something different. But if you are just another run-of-the-mill emigree who wants to come over for a better life, and you are in line with a bunch of others, you should not be chosen at random. You should be chosen in accordance to your merit. Do we want the janitor or the biochemist? Both desperately want to be American citizens. Both are willing and love our nation with everything that they are. They've been found to be perfect contributors to society. One will be equally as valuable as the other in terms of being an American citizen. But based on merit, on how they can benefit the country as a whole, I'm sorry, I'm going to go for the biochemist. Why? Because the biochemist is likely to be incredibly employable and will almost certainly not need federal assistance. We're looking for people who can come here and succeed. I agree with give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Absolutely, let them come, and they should. That's what America has been built upon, the notion that hard work can take you far, and that it is meritorious to work hard your whole life. But there are certain fields that are going to be more valuable to the American people in the long run. Not more valuable as people, more valuable for their skills. And I'm sorry, that's not inhumane. We need janitors, we need plumbers, we need electricians by the score. We need skilled laborers by the score. If you are an unskilled laborer and you want to come to America to better yourself, that's fantastic. But buddy, you're going to have to get in line behind the people who already have something to offer. And if that makes me a cold bastard, then I'll make sure I wear a long sleeve. Then the fourth and final pillar, this one is being attacked full court press by the media and by the DNC. And you want to talk about collusion, there it is, full flippin' stop. The fourth and final pillar protects the nuclear family by ending chain migration. Under the current broken system, a single immigrant can bring in a virtually unlimited number of distant relatives. Under our plan, we focus on the immediate family by limiting sponsorships to spouses and minor children. Do you know why? Because full-grown adults need to be considered based upon their own damn merits. If you are over the age of 18, your mom, dad, and minor brothers and sisters are coming over all together as a family unit, you now need to be considered under your own merits. And if your family has made the decision to move to the United States, them's the breaks, kid. You're an adult now. You are your own responsibility. And while we're talking about it, I agree with that on healthcare too, but that's another topic for another day. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to jump really quick to my very own Congressional District 8 here in the beautiful desert southwest of Arizona, and we're going to talk about the extremely complex race to replace Congressman Trent Franks. You're listening to the HollowNet Podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. Stick around.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
I see people coming together not for divisiveness of party or for dichotomy of thought, but for unity in principle. In the principles that founded our nation, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Today, ladies and gentlemen, those principles are under the sternest attack that we have seen in many generations. It has become a crime in this nation merely to express a difference in opinion from what is held by your party to be doctrine, from what is purported by the media to be truth. We have an opportunity to reach out to our fellow Americans regardless of their creed and regardless of their political inclinations, and unite as Americans, not as Republicans or as Democrats, as liberals or conservatives, but to unite around the principles that have guided this nation so well. I've covered a lot of stories, but the story that remains untold is the story of America in the 21st century, when we choose to turn back the tide against progressive socialism, when we choose to embrace the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and the Bill of Rights, when we remember what it is to be Americans. And that principle will not die as long as there's one man, one woman, one child who looks defiantly into the night and says, I am free.
You're listening to the HollowNet podcast on the Lanterns Media Network. The new conservative resistance begins right here, right now.
Allied reinforcements have arrived from the west.
You're listening to the HollowNet on Lanterns Media Network. The Millennial Conservative Resistance begins here.
All right. We are back. You're listening to the HollowNet podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network after that god-awful Matthew McConaughey impersonation.
Earthman. What a shithole.
I couldn't agree more, Jones. Especially after looking today at the Twitter feeds, which are football. Unless you're talking about the Kitten Bowl or the Puppy Bowl. That's also there on Twitter. Apparently, today is the day when America completely forgets anything else in the world matters and cries out in one defiant voice, are you ready for some football? All right. So never mind State of the Union, Memo-gate, and all that other crap that's going around, or the fact that Congressional District 8 is holding a very infrequent emergency election to replace Mr. Trent Franks, who, of late, resigned. He actually resigned from office surrounded in scandal. And the reason why he did that was because it had come out that he had discussed the prospect of surrogate motherhood or surrogacy with some of his female office workers who worked there with the congressman, and this created a hostile work environment, and some people complained. I'm sure there's more to this than meets the eye, but the media has pretty much let it go, and Trent Franks has faded into the annals of history. Now, competing for that spot for Congressional District 8, which is traditionally a very conservative, extremely conservative seat, representing the northwest of the Greater Valley of Phoenix, we have Debbie Lesko, Phil Lovis, Steve Montenegro, Bob Stump, and also Chad Allen, Kevin Kavanaugh, Brendan Dilley, Stephen Dolgos, David Leon, Richard Mack, Christopher Sylvester, Claire Van Steenwyck, and Mark Yates. And kids, that's just on the Republican side. Holy crap. What's the count on that? Was that like 11 people? Jeebus. All right. So 11 people on the Republican side are currently competing in the special election primary that is going to be Election Day on the 27th of February. I already have my ballot, and we are going to be digging into this, especially during next week's show. We've already lined up some guests for that. We're trying to get a hold of as many of the candidates as possible to get a quick statement from them. There was a Facebook Live debate on AZ Central's Facebook page, which many felt was a game changer for a few of these candidates. And as of last night, I believe, it appears that 2 of the 3 top candidates, Steve Montenegro and Debbie Lesko, are both in front running right now with 21% polling, with Phil Lovis lagging behind at 12%, and everyone else effectively off the radar. So they are now calling this, in essence, a 2-person race for the CD8 seat. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can pull up that story for you. I believe that's off of azcentral.com. You'll be able to locate that. And it appears 16, according to the Arizona Capital Times on January 11th, is the full number of people who filed to run for this seat. Now, in a recent story, Arizona Capital Times said that Democrats need to be lucky and good simultaneously in order to have a chance at winning CD8. I agree. There is a Hiral Tiperneni, which I'm certain that I'm butchering that name, and I apologize. Hiral is running on the DNC ticket, and Hiral, I believe, is a physician, and stands a reasonably good chance of aligning the left such as it exists in the West Valley here, but I think this is all said and done a Republican race. It will truly be something unique and interesting if the DNC in Arizona can actually put up a realistic candidate. I just don't see it as incredibly likely to happen. This is a traditionally conservative part of a very conservative state. There's absolutely nothing purple about this district. Now, if we take a look to the recent news regarding these candidates, the last AZ Central debate, as I said, was a bit of a game changer, and one piece that came out strong was support or opposition to the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, which I actually covered back in my days at the Blaze, and something that could be crippling for current resigned state senator Steve Montenegro could be his support for the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. And as an additional complication, just the other day, as part of the hashtag #MeToo movement, so it would seem, State Representative Don Shooter was expelled from the Arizona House. In a first, he was actually expelled from office. So far, the first candidate to have been so. The first representative in any state legislature. And it was no small story here, even ending with a mic drop at his final defense. Now we're going to see if we can get a hold of Don Shooter and see if we can get his take on things. But now the big question will be, who is going to replace Don Shooter at the state level. And actually, I must give myself a correction from before. That news article referring to Debbie Lesko and Steve Montenegro breaking away each at 21%, that is actually on KTAR.com. That is KTAR News 92.3. And they are actually reporting an OH Predictive Insights poll, which shows both candidates at 21%. Debbie taking an increase in 5 points. Steve Montenegro up 20 points from December 11th's previous poll, and Phil Lovis up 10 points in that. Bob Stump plunging 8% after it came out in the debate. People brought questions of whether or not utilizing the name Bob Stump, which I believe is his middle name, instead of Christopher Stump, is he attempting to channel and utilize the name recognition of an unrelated, extremely popular Arizona congressman from yesteryear. So with that massive bomb drop, it appears Bob Stump is now effectively dropping off the radar. So we have a lot to stay tuned to. Next week, we're going to dig into more depth on the Arizona CD8 race and also the fallout from the expulsion of State Representative Don Shooter. All that right here in Legislative District 13 of Arizona, my own LD. That was a huge, huge shock for all of us here. Now, before we break away and I go to enjoy Little Smokies and macaroni and cheese and all the other things that come associated with the Super Bowl, I'm not supposed to use that word, sorry, the big game, dare I say. I may have to go back in and edit that later. Before we get to that, we have to get to Amtrak. Now, 6 hours ago, it was reported on theblaze.com, a second Amtrak crash in less than a week leaves 2 dead and more than 100 injured. The first Amtrak crash that garnered national attention did so because it was carrying a congressional delegation on the way to their retreat. Luckily, no one was injured. However, it did engender thoughts of potential sabotage or terrorist act or possibly a hit against Congress. Not the case. It appears a garbage truck driver in the wrong place at the wrong time was the cause there. But now, according to the Blaze's Terry Webster, 2 people were killed and more than 100 were injured when an Amtrak passenger train collided with a CSX freight train in South Carolina around 2:34 a.m. Sunday. The 2 people who died in the wreck were both Amtrak employees, CBS News reported. It was not immediately clear if they were from the passenger train or the freight train. More than 100 people were transported to local hospitals with injuries ranging from cuts and bruises to severe broken bones, according to Lexington County Sheriff's Department. Now, here in Arizona, we're no strangers to train wrecks. If you're a student of history, you may know in the early 1990s, the sabotage and derailment of the Sunset Limited actually took place less than 100 miles from where I now sit, in the outskirts of Buckeye and Tonopah and Arlington, Arizona. That is where the Sunset Limited was sabotaged and derailed. We've seen this kind of thing before. Trains are a big part of life in Arizona. I cross probably 5 different sets of railroad tracks between my home and my office. Up in Flagstaff, an ever-present background hum is that of locomotives. You hear their horns constantly all day. It's rather reassuring, actually, especially for somebody like me. I grew up in Jersey. Amtrak blowing by the house was kind of a thing. I remember it well from hanging out at my uncle's house in Perth Amboy. But I think we have to grip the mirror really tightly, and we have to look ourselves dead in the eye as a nation and come to grips with the fact that the mistake of Amtrak, of this government takeover of passenger rail, has come home to roost, and it is now costing lives. The Cato Institute on December 19th, 1996, this is how old this notion is, said Amtrak at 25, end of the line for taxpayer subsidies. This is written by Gene Love, Wendell Cox, and Steve Moore over at the Cato Institute, was their policy analysis number 266. They say, this year Amtrak is celebrating its silver anniversary. Unfortunately, after 25 years of federal ownership, $13 billion in federal subsidies, and just think that was as of 96. Amtrak appears to be no closer to financial independence than the day taxpayer assistance began. This study shows virtually every stated justification for continued Amtrak subsidies is based on myth and not on reality. That from the Cato Institute. And more recently even than that, President Trump's budget, according to CNN as of April 1st, 2017, stated that many of the more photogenic train routes of the United States will no longer be serviced by Amtrak. I'm asking this. Is it time, as a nation, to put to bed the notion that large infrastructural businesses like Amtrak, like the United States Postal Service, can or should be subsidized and controlled by the government? I believe they shouldn't be. I believe the time has come to dissolve and divest Amtrak and to bring about the age of private passenger rail in the United States once again. Because speaking for myself, I cannot afford regular air travel. The majority of Americans today cannot afford regular air travel. It is one of the biggest sources of credit card debt, are people needing to fly cross country. And sometimes you can't hop in the car and drive for 4 days. This country needs private passenger rail. And I think that will put us on the best footing to compete internationally for jobs and also for business. If you want your city and your state to be chosen for the next Amazon headquarters or for the next Apple headquarters, you need to make sure your public transportation is on point. So the parties that are concerned need to jump in here, which are the local governments, the state governments, and the private sector. This is one more of many facets of our lives that the federal government just needs to get the hell out of. Because the butcher's bill has come in from Amtrak. 2 dead this week, 100 injured. How many more before we realize that the federal government is ill-equipped to run the train system in this country? That's all we have this week for this HollowNet podcast here on the Lanterns Media Network. Thank you so much for tuning in with us. Now I leave you to go enjoy the big game, and I will talk to you next week. Until then, good night. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. From Phoenix, I'm Matt Holloway. Hey everyone, this is Matt Holloway, and I hope you're enjoying our podcast so far. It's been exciting putting this together for you, and I'm looking forward to many more to come. I did want to let you know that in setting up the HollowNet and getting everything launched here, we've gone ahead and set up a page on Patreon.com. Now, if you haven't heard of Patreon, Patreon is a website that's similar to other crowdfunding sources that allows you to support on a month-to-month basis those sources, those artists, and those groups that you really care about and that you're passionate about. And I hope that we can ignite passion in a lot of people to become more involved in the political process, and also to become involved in the conversation and to keep that political dialogue alive. So I'd like to humbly ask you today to consider becoming a patron of the HollowNet on Patreon.com, and you can access that at Patreon.com/theHollowNet. We have various levels of patronage. You can become a patron for as little as $1 a month, which unlocks exclusive content for the Patreon community, such as a feed of patron-only content. Then you have a $5 option, which gives you behind-the-scenes access to blog about the different inspirations that we have. It'll give you access to patrons-only polling. And then we have a $10 option, which gives you a signed digital poster plus everything else. $20 option, which gives you name in the credits on the site, and all other rewards. And we even have a segment sponsor package available on Patreon, which is $125 a month, which entitles you and your business to a 60-second ad as a segment sponsor during the podcast, of course, subject to content approval. So if you would like to become a patron of the HollowNet, we would be greatly thankful to you, and it's going to go toward a solid cause of generating this sort of millennial constitutional conservative content that is so lacking in our media today. So thank you for your time, for your consideration, and for being a part of the HollowNet. Here we hold the line against the night, and the millennial conservative resistance begins here.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.